Well, hello, and welcome to our fifth and final installment so far of the Creative Sandbox live Hangout series. We have a little bit of a special treat today. We're going to start with Goodby, who will be seeing via Hangouts, but we actually have McCann in the house sitting right next to me that you can't see quite yet, but you will soon. So this is truly live. My name is Brian Morose. I work with creative agencies here at Google. If you haven't joined any of these before, you're going to learn about a couple of really fantastic uses of Google technology. Today's focus is on Geo products, and I'm going to introduce now my colleague Josh, who is out in Mountain View, who is a Geo products expert. Josh?
Hi folks, and thank you. So I'm Josh with me. I'm part of our Maps developer relations team. And we're basically here to ensure all the cool stuff that our Google Maps platform with Geo products on it is accessible and easy to use by third parties, such as we have today, and all the developers who want to use Maps to tell their story. That includes chatting with people, supporting them online, making sure pieces like our documentation examples are useful and hopefully inspiring for people who have a nice story to tell. And so for projects like these, it's always really exciting that folks have an interesting angle through Maps as kind of a canvas for something really.
Great, and so having Josh on the line means two things. Josh can ask questions of the folks on the call, but more importantly, the agencies who have worked with the Maps products, please feel free to ask anything you'd like of Josh, demand things, request things, so that's why he's here. No need to be shy. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the work that Goodby did. We'll take a look at a video, and then we'll have an introduction round and start asking some questions. Oh, which video I'm being asked? Hold on, this is live. Okay, so Goodby, if you guys can tell us what we're seeing here.
It should be the bank bridges walkthrough, and this is basically just the user flow, and you see that sort of snake of bridges, and how you added a bridge using Google Maps. And also moving over the different tiles of bridges in this snake, you can see the users' social media accounts and what they logged in with to share this, whether it was us or Twitter or Facebook. And that should be it. Yep.
So we just saw a series of bridges being built and the total length of the bridges as it was added. So well, first of all, let's go ahead and introduce the folks from Goodby who are online. Can you guys just introduce yourself and let us know what role you play at the agency?
Well, I can start because I talked where the demo you just saw. My name is Anders Gustafsson. I'm a creative director at Goodby. I work across the agency, but I worked on this project with the rest of the team.
Great.
My name is Hannah. I'm an art director here at Goodby.
Graham Lewis, copywriter at Goodby, across accounts, and lucky enough to work on this one.
And I'm Margaret Brett Kearns, and I'm the interactive producer on this project. And we also actually have maybe Michael. You can introduce yourself. This is the Famous group, and they were the developers who helped us.
Hi guys, I'm Michael, and I'm the interactive director at Famous.
And I'm Brandon, and I'm the lead developer on the project.
All right, so we have the whole gang there. It sounds like. Let me ask you guys just initially, where did the idea come from? What was the seed of the idea, and how did you guys work through it and come to this final piece, which is almost like an art piece of sorts? Where did it generate, and how did it build?
Well, I could just kick this off, and then Hannah and Graham can fill in. I think we've got some partnerships with Google, like since before, and we're always looking at new interesting technology. I think in this case, it was just super relevant because the Golden Gate Bridge 75th anniversary, and we wanted like everyone in the world to be able to participate. So the Maps API is it's such a great platform now that everyone uses like almost on a daily basis. So it made total sense to do something based on this API. And Hannah and Graham can talk some more about the idea and how that came to be.
Yeah, kind of going off of what Anders was saying with, really wanting something that could go across all these different types of social media, because, obviously the big thing for us was accessibility, and really wanting everyone to participate, even if they weren't as savvy with different things online. So big thing for us was just wanting something that was familiar and really was able to kind of bring people together and allow anyone to participate.
Great. So it sounds like it started from the idea of the bridge itself, then moved into the technology that people use very commonly, and then the concept of the social element, allowing people to kind of play together, was the direction. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And also, when we started to do research about bridges, it felt pretty natural that bridges was made to bring people together. And today we have the social media, and it's like the bridges today in the world, across the world.
Right, as a metaphor, but also as a physical object and also as a digital object that you can then start to combine and play with. So let me ask you guys on the developmental front. The idea seems pretty clear, and it seems like one that's, once you're hit with it, it seems so natural and kind of easy to understand. But on the technical side of actually patching things together, being able to connect both the people socially as well as build the bridge physically as an object that you're seeing on the screen, how did that process go? Was it a fairly smooth sailing? Were there certain technical hurdles that you guys had to deal with? Did you already have a lot of experience with mapping applications? How did that work?
So it was definitely a challenge. Sorry. It was definitely a challenge, from the beginning, figuring out how we were going to get all of these bridges to line up. We kind of prototyped it using just paper at first, just to figure out how the line crosses through the tile and how we're going to get all these different lines going in different directions to kind of line up and form the bridge. Luckily, during the prototyping phase, Brandon was actually able to come up with a system for actually lining these up and creating that snake, that smooth, kind of never-ending snake.
Yeah, so basically what we determined was when Google, with Google Maps API, when you give 2 points and have the Google Maps draw a line through those 2 points, that line will always go through the center of the image that you request from Google. And so that leaves us with basically 4 types of tiles, bridge tiles, that can be determined. One that goes, basically 4 types of bridges that can be determined. And so certain bridges cannot be overlapped on certain other bridges, and so we have to determine which bridges can and cannot overlap. So if I may, say you have I'll go closer. So you have a type 1 bridge that goes like that, and a type 2 bridge that goes like this. These can go and touch each other, no problem. Then you have a type 3 bridge that goes this direction, and a type 4 bridge that goes this direction. A type 4 bridge cannot be overlapped with type 3 bridge, because you'll see that you literally cut off part of the bridge.
Right.
And so we can't allow that. So those are some of the hurdles we have to basically figure out and solve.
And did you guys do that essentially in-house, or did you have, just out of my own curiosity, did you guys work with folks like Josh at Google, or did you have your own ways of figuring that out?
So I think we did a bit of investigation on our own at the outset, just kind of gleaning what we could from the documentation and the APIs, and just kind of experimenting during the prototyping phase. And then later on, once we had kind of more in-depth questions, being able to speak with someone like Josh at Google was kind of critical for us to get past certain hurdles. Like, for example, the Zoom level. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, and the reason I asked that is certain people over the last week, some have worked heavily with Google, some have just been like, nope, the documentation was there for us, we figured it out, we had it done. So it's just interesting to hear from circumstance to circumstance how things got done when you actually hit that wall. So I have one more question, then I'll turn it over to Josh to see if he has any questions for you guys. I guess my final question is, how did you determine who at the agency was going to come together to work on this? So you have a lot of diverse roles here on the call. I imagine there are people who are not on the call who were involved. How did you put that team together?
Well, I mean, it's the bridge is, it's the client that GSP has been working with for a long time, and Rich Silverstein is very involved with the city and the bridge and the national parks. So I mean, it's basically a pro bono project, and whenever you get a pro bono project, it kind of, the way you put the team together is, you try to find the creatives that are really, they got the energy and they want to work with this, and they really feel like, this is something that want to get involved in, and it's kind of almost like determined by who really wants to do it, So I think there's some people missing from the team right now, and I don't think that it was necessarily a traditional creative team in the sense that you have one writer and one art director and one designer and so forth. It was just a bunch of people that really wanted to do something cool for the bridge, and sort of felt the love for this project. That's how it turned out.
Interesting. So it was definitely a non-traditional team formatting, but obviously it was successful. So always good to see that. Josh, did you have any questions for these guys? How they did it? Any of the technological stuff? Just anything generally for them?
Yeah, well, first of all, we chatted quite a few times. I have to say it's really nice to see you guys in person, or faces, that is, rather than on just email. But yeah, we had a lot of great conversations, and the main thing that I enjoyed was just the crazy ideas that were coming through to see if they were feasible. Like, I remember there was an idea of having people actually draw live images of Street View, when they would be video taped, and then how could we get that live on the interactive site? All kinds of really creative stuff. I guess my main question, the I have for most developers, I'd be curious if there's features that could have been in the API that would have made your life easier, or other things that we could do, because it's easier for agencies like yourselves to kind of dive in and create the things you want. It's not just putting markers on a map, but more of that kind of a canvas of what I think is
One thing that would have been really helpful is if Google had an API to pull bridges, essentially. That was one of the main challenges, because Goodby and Margaret, they kept wanting a list of all possible bridges, and there was no real way to do that. One thing we looked into was getting that list of bridges from like the National Traffic Safety Board or something like that, but that turned out to be kind of like not really feasible in this situation. So definitely getting a list of bridges and other types of roads would be a nice feature for the Google Maps API to have.
It's kind of a specialized use case, but I think for us it might have made things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. It was one of the challenges that we had on the creative side when we were thinking about how are people going to use this, and we wanted it to be something that was easy for people to find a bridge without having to use too many brain cells. But it's actually turned out to be an interesting series of months on this project to see how the bridge has evolved and how it's traveled through different countries. And we seem to be having, for example, a burst now in Russia. There are a lot of Russians who are participating, and we've had bursts in Southeast Asia, and we started with a giant burst in Brazil. So maybe in the end not having that list of bridges wasn't a terrible thing, but it would have been nice to have it to begin with.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. I think more generally, yeah, providing people more in-depth access to the features that underlie the map is a comment that we get quite a bit for all kinds of different reasons. People are interested in more than just, say, for example, places we expose the sort of businesses and other entities around you. So maybe yours is specialized case is definitely a good request. So good call.
I got a question for you, Josh. Have we actually created a big database of bridges for you right now that you will use in the future? Because it feels like we've actually done the labeling for you now.
It's for sale. It's very inexpensive.
We can make it pay down the line. Yeah, I haven't actually looked at that. That's an interesting other point, which is you guys are storing all of your data on App Engine. You guys kind of created a fairly straightforward but really nice little App Engine site where people, all of their traces and the metadata is stored. Obviously, we don't look in there, but it is a useful data set to have. It's an interesting thing to think about, when your project is finished. Is there ways you could, make better use of that information in there?
Cool.
Another kind of thing that had come up, one of the other art directors, Azana Shervin, that worked on this project with us, had noticed that one kind of hurdle that we had was figuring out how we could legally use some of the images from Google Maps itself, because there is some kind of variance just in terms of usage, in terms of cropping and rotating and things like that. So I think looking at kind of like really clear-cut either rules for usage, or maybe seeing about having to be uniform across, because I know that I think certain areas have, or the images are owned by different sections, which is kind of like a universal database to pull from. I think for something that like this, it really helps having to be unified like that.
That's an interesting point, and that's something that we run across, or at least I do when I work with agencies somewhat frequently. Is it's not even so much can you do it as is the policy accepting of that usage. So that's a great point. Making that stuff crystal clear and very cut and dry. All right, so lots of great information. Thank you guys. If you don't mind, please hang out for a little bit longer so that we can all ask questions of everyone at the end of the session here today. But from here, we're going to go ahead and we'll switch over to McCann. So let's take a look at their reel, and then we'll jump in.
This is to keep the bears away.
evening light, when the women of the woods came by to give to you the word of the old man.
Okay, so going from bridges to trails. I have our friends from McCann sitting here with me in studio live today. I'm a little disappointed they didn't bring us a bear stick to keep the bears away, but I'm going to let that one go for now. Can you guys just give a quick introduction and tell us who you are, what you do at the agency?
Hi, I'm Raed. I'm a developer at Your Majesty, and I helped lead the project on the development side.
I'm Catherine Patterson. I'm the executive producer at McCann for the Integrated Group.
And I'm Matt Beischer. I'm a group creative director at McCann.
All right. So I'm going to ask you guys the same question that I initially asked of the bridge project. Where did the idea come from? I mean, clearly the client in this case is not a pro bono. This is something to do with nature. It's a granola bar, so you have that kind of natural element. But you guys went somewhere really unique and really specific. How did that happen?
You know, I always start out answering this question by almost like giving credit to Nature Valley, just from the standpoint that they do a thing once a year called Bold Experiments, where they essentially put out to their partner agencies this sort of grand mission of give us something from a marketing standpoint that isn't in the sort of regular calendar year of marketing and is something a bigger sort of like interesting notion that that can live in a bigger space and in a bigger way. So I think we were lucky from the standpoint that Nature Valley was sort of on the forefront of marketing and wanting to do interesting and cool stuff. So for us, it was a bold experiment that was kind of put to us, and this was kind of the solution that we came back with. There was a number of brands that they asked for bold solutions for, and Nature Valley was one of them.
Okay. And what led to the idea of mapping these trails specifically?
So in terms of coming to that conclusion of mapping trails, it was almost a little bit of it seemed like a kind of a natural progression for us. Nature Valley always has had for the past 3 years a great relationship with the national parks. Great. They do a program called Preserve the Parks, and it seemed like a natural fit for us. If they're doing Preserve the Parks program, why would we not actually digitally start to preserve these parks?
Nice.
So the notion of kind of marrying Street View with what we're calling Trail View seemed like a very sort of natural progression for us. Was ultimately fun for us to go out and do, and seemed very cool for us.
Yeah, it looked like fun. Those camera units look crazy, like satellites basically on top of these guys' backpacks. Super cool stuff. So on the technical front, what were the challenges that you guys found? What was the basic technology that you laid down to use, and where did you kind of come into areas where you stumbled and overcame them?
Right, so I've used Google Maps a bunch on a couple of projects beforehand.
Okay.
And right around October of last year, Street View became actually enabled with WebGL, and it gave us like a 3D view, and that was actually exposed in the API, so I didn't look back. I just went ahead and selected that as a platform of choice. And then the second hurdle was basically processing all that data and all that footage.
Right.
And we made a little infographic about this stuff. We basically had like 12 terabytes of video and like 6 gigabytes of GPS data. Not all of which was necessarily clean and accurate, given to satellite coverage on the trails and the parks.
Right.
So yeah, just mapping those trails, looking at them every day for almost 6 months was definitely a great experience.
Get to know them very well. You don't have to ever walk them.
Well, I have to just go there now and see if it's true.
Learn them virtually.
Very cool. And how did the interactive process work when it came from here's our ideas, okay, great, now here's the technical piece, now here are the people we're hiring to walk the trails. Who was involved at what time? How tight was that?
I'll turn it over to Kat, but that for me was the super interesting part. Just the notion that we can have this great idea and turn it over to someone like Kat and watch her sort of like actually figure out how to do this, which is the really difficult part.
One of the things that we focused on obviously takes a lot of different disciplines and teams. So the first order of business was who is the field team is going to be capable of going out and capturing hundreds and hundreds of miles, and who is our home team who will be adequately trained to participate in those hundreds and hundreds of miles in terms of capture. So we obviously partnered with YM first as our design team, development team. Our next order of business was looking for the appropriate field team, the production team, and then looking at the camera technologies that we were going to be implementing on the trails. So we needed to look at different things. We needed to look at elevation. We needed to look at temperatures. We got into some discovery questions around what happens if you have this sort of camera rig on a human body and you walk him into the Grand Canyon and he's been there for 12 hours. At what point does your camera equipment start to malfunction? So we had all kinds of really interesting sort of logical operational tests and questions. And then we needed to look at how does this really work as an army coming together with all of these elements, right? We're going to go out to these very remote locations, which means we need a SWAT team on the ground out there capable of capturing very aggressive content. We're going to bring that content back. We need an unbelievably gifted development team and post-processing team able to take that content, process it, and build it into a technology platform. And then obviously a big design element was also a big part of the platform is for us enabling people to experience very, very high-end visual POIs, points of interest, inside these trail environments. So the camera, the design direction in terms of photography, which was led by Your Majesty, by Jens Carlson, who's their ECD there, was very much focused on how do we give you a very deep immersive experience of these POIs and bring all those things together into the platform. So it's a lot of elements coming together, but it made it very fun to work on.
Yeah, quite a lot of elements. So quick reminder to the folks who are watching this live, if you have questions, you'll be seeing a link popping up now and again that you can enter questions into our moderator tool, so you can ask anything of either agency or of Josh. And speaking of Josh, Josh, what are your questions for these guys on this this application that they created, this whole kind of immersive world that they built?
Yeah, well, first, it's a really beautiful site. I think it's such a nice idea put together so well and so smoothly. It looks great. I'll cheat and use the same question I had before, which is, as you obviously had a lot of moving parts, but one of them was integrating with API. And most of the time when we see people do what we call custom preview within the API, it's just a few snapshots, maybe it's inside their particular business, or if it's a hike, it'd be 1 or 2 shots along the hike where they have a 360 panorama to interact with. But you guys went to a whole other level. And I'd be curious to know if the API just was there for you, or what are things we could do to make it easier and better for the next, super exciting thing that you guys want to build on top of it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the API is constantly evolving. I actually haven't looked at the recent docs, but I'm sure there are a couple of features that are currently enabled. But when I started, I was having a really interesting translation problem between designs and what could the API offer. And I ran into a couple of very technical specific hurdles. Spanning your strokes on path, or spatially putting markers in the 3D view so you can pinpoint mountains, or really accurately pinpoint points of interest and not just place them there. And yeah, I mean, I think you guys, we've had a couple of discussions, and these seems to be like community-wide requests and features that are of interest. And in phase 2, hopefully we can tackle those stuff. But producing a quality design like the one we did, and with all the moving parts, was very challenging. I mean, it was a big integration process between adding custom menus and the elevation chart, so it functions as both a navigational device, and it gives you an idea of the topology. I mean, there's so many features that we can actually keep asking you guys for, but yeah. We pushed it to the limit, and I think we did a pretty good job enabling all these things, and it's pretty massive. I mean, each trail is about 50,000 frames, and we try to do an autoplay feature that kind of does what you guys do, but you guys seem to have the secret sauce, and we don't. Hopefully we'll give it over one day. Just to be able to cruise along the trail, just navigating and see all this high-res photography will be fantastic one day, and I think we're getting closer with the web moving forward.
All right, Josh, make that happen. What was the timeline like for you guys on this project? Because oftentimes, these things come up, and then in this past week when we've had these hangout sessions, I've just been amazed at how short sometimes the time frame is. How is it for this project, given that it was so complicated?
I mean, Kat can probably speak to schedule. I mean, I know it's Scott, it's almost been 2 years now, right, since we first started the project?
I think what's really interesting about a platform like this is obviously a very deep integrated platform development, is that there are 3 timelines, right? There's a timeline that's an 18-month timeline, and then inside that we sort of looked at it as 3 marathons with hurdles, right? The first was defining the content that we wanted to capture and going out and capturing the content. The next was bringing it home and laying out the platform foundation, and then really doing a site build, really doing a due diligence and then sort of looking at editorial and content layers and making it richer and deeper. So from a sort of producing point of view for our teams, we were very focused psychologically on the idea that these were key markers and that we needed to get to each one of these sort of delivery points and then sort of be in the state of mind to go into that next platform development. But overall, we've been working on this platform. It will be 2 years in February, and we're continuing to work on evolving the platform with stuff that is sort of planned and in production, and will continue through pretty much late summer and the end of 2013.
Wow, so this is a really long-term project. This is something you guys, you've used the word platform a few times, and I think that's a key thing to bring up. That this is not this wasn't like a campaign where you're like, this is just, hey, it's going to run and it's great. Right. It's a platform that you want to have that's going to live, for a long period of time, and that's going to be built on and change over time.
I think one of the things that is really important about the way we approach this work for the brand, for us as creatives and producers inside it, was talking about a philosophical principle that we were going to iterate against many, many times over. So it was about connecting with nature, creating a platform that allowed people to experience nature in unique and evolved ways using these technologies, and then building on that and iterating against that, so that the mandate was always, how do we enable you and empower you, whoever you are, to enjoy nature in these different ways.
It was also, I think, building on that, it was almost a natural for us, just because Nature Valley has and already had this kind of ongoing promise to these national parks. They had this Preserve the Parks program, so for us it was almost like this was a really great sort of creative expression and extension of that kind of natural platform. So the notion of building a digital expression of that promise seemed like a really cool challenge for us.
Yeah, very, very cool. And there was a in the video you noticed a little bit of a social element to it, and that's just the magic word for everything these days. Like if you have a client who doesn't ask for social, you like, what? Why? But the word social is such a almost a non-word. I mean, its definition is so broad as to be almost meaningless, depending on the context. Clearly, you have an element there. How did you bake that piece in? How did you, come up with how that was going to be a social thing, and then technologically make it happen?
Right. I'll start and then Kat will jump in. Yeah. Kat and I do this all the time.
Tag team.
But so I think the notion of adding a piece of involving people was always something that has been in the back of our minds. And as Kat was saying, it was such a sort of daunting and massive mission to even start to almost lay the groundwork for the project and actually physically go out and capture for the first round 300 some plus miles and hundreds more that we're adding on now, that it was very important for us to get that sort of groundwork laid. And we always knew that the next sort of phase is to actually bring people. We have the groundwork laid, and then you need to sort of invite people to play and be a part of it. So we have we do have an element of social where you can send actual specific points, and people can jump directly into 360-degree views, and you can tweet and Facebook it and stuff. But I think that's even the start of our next sort of big challenge in terms of how exactly a much bigger sort of social layer really lives on the site and allows people to sort of be a part of it in a very big way.
And just to add to strategically, philosophically, the idea was we are all the stewards and the preservationists of this park and this culture and this heritage. It is our territory to have responsibility for that. Now we're empowering you to have community and sort of integrated community around that, and following on that, we are literally charging you with becoming stewards and preservationists in your own right of these national parks, So these are tools that we're currently working on in terms of evolving the platform from something that's very immersive and experiential into something that's very tactical and utility driven in terms of here's what you can now do yourself in this park, in these regions, as these communities, to be part of this incredibly important sort of cultural heritage that we feel everyone should be involved in and engaged with.
Great. So a couple more questions for you guys, and then we'll open it up to any questions from the folks who have been watching. But something that I definitely need to know: were there any bear attacks during the filming of this? Were any hikers injured during the creation of this?
Well, ironically, none of our hikers were injured or attacked. We saw many wild animals. We were obviously rubes, Adelaide rubes going out into the wilderness. Should have been its own behind-the-scenes movie. But we saw amazing wildlife: snakes, bears, bison, incredible nature. It took us from a place of braggadocio and like anxiety into just having our minds completely blown. And for us and for the teams, having that experience empirically really made us understand you must be in nature. Like, we were so blown away by those types of engagements without injury that we really were jazzed about getting people to not just to get into the platform, but get out to these parks. These parks are amazing. Yep.
I think we were all like just really surprised about when we finally got out there and started doing this. I think we always liked the notion of this platform, but I think we were all very surprised by how much it actually sort of personally affected us, being able to actually be in, as Ken Burns says, America's greatest idea for as long as we were, and we were very lucky, and it was a pretty humbling experience, actually.
Very cool. All right, so my last question is, given the scope of this kind of a project, manpower, ideas, technologically, I'm going to ask you guys separately, from the creative ideation, putting it all together standpoint, and then from the technology standpoint. And we'll start with technology. Yeah. If you had one piece of advice to give to anyone who is trying to do something that is somehow similar to this project, what would be the one thing you should say? Just be aware that you should always do this or never try that. What's the one important thing you could tell them?
If it's a fellow developer, read the docs really well. That's the first thing. You will discover a lot of answers there. And second, I would say experiment and try to poke more. But I know that the API doesn't offer all the features that we liked. But I would say there's a good community out there, and if you keep peeking and pushing, Google maybe, from Mountain View, will respond and give us some good stuff one day.
We'll post Josh's personal email up at the end of this.
On the other hand, I think the problem we faced was just the massive share of footage is really unconventional, and I would say, if you can shoot that much and bring it back to the lab, that's great. But take your diligence in picking the right format and be patient and producing the highest quality imagery, and then the API will be there to carry you all the way through. And then you probably, just an anecdote. If you're actually wondering what to select, that might sound like a plug for you guys, but we looked at some other mapping engines, and most of them worked like a crab. So you traverse the world like a crab in 2D view, and that's not acceptable anymore these days. So I encourage everyone to play with the maps if you haven't. I know most of the experiments are like placing markers on a map, but there's a lot more you can do, and then there's a bunch of opportunities that are like coming up every day. So
great.
Keep playing.
And one piece of advice from your guys' side, from the idea development and production of this?
Have CAD involved. No, the thing that I was constantly amazed about was, we collectively as a team, Leslie Sims, Jason Schmall, and I had an idea, and it's one thing to have an idea, but that it's a completely another thing to watch it sort of come to life. We had no idea if this was possible, how to do it, and just surround yourself with the best people, and that's what we did.
And just from production, learning from creative and like all team integration, the best note that we got was in the cab going to the Great Smokies on the way out to the first day of trails, where we were sitting in the back of the car with creatives, and creatives were like, you know what I think? I think you're gonna make the show that you want, because it's gonna get canceled anyway someday. So like, go for broke. Make exactly the platform that you want, because sooner or later, life moves on. So that was really for us inspiring in terms of being like, hell yeah, we're going for it. Like we're gonna get every hurdle because we're gonna make it exactly what we want. And so we were very focused on troubleshooting and problem solving because we knew exactly what that show was that we wanted, you know, just to use the traditional. But I would say that go for the big idea, the big picture, and be very brave and know that it's in you and it's in your teams to accomplish those things for sure.
Great. We've heard that general sentiment a lot this week, but this is the first time I've heard it with the negative reinforcement of it's going to eventually die anyway. So why not make something super cool?
That is the built-in pessimism of my old partner Jason Small and I. Yeah.
All right, great. So thank you guys. Thanks everyone for being on this call. I think this was very illuminating. Two totally, completely different uses of this technology, both of which are beautiful and engaging and truly social and just lovely to look at and very complicated to make. So it was great to have you guys. Let's take a look at the questions that have come in. And anyone who wants to answer these from any quadrant, please just jump in. Let's see. So I'm refreshing my page here. All right, we have several questions. So here's one from Mia in Wisconsin. As more people interact with the campaigns, will there continue to be the same user experience, or are more elements being added? And let's talk actually. Let's talk about the bridge project first. Are you guys going to be adding to that, or is that something where it's an art piece that's just kind of growing naturally, or are you going to be adding functionality?
At this point, we're not planning on adding functionality to it. The anniversary event was at the end of May.
Okay.
And it's just been really interesting to see how it's traveled around the world and grown organically on its own. So at this point, you know, we'd love to optimize some of the functionality, but it's a pro bono project, so we're always in a tight budget situation. What's been interesting is as more and more people have participated and more bridges have been added, we've had a little bit, we've had a little bit of, a slowdown in the experience as a result, because we're almost a victim of our own success. So that would be the one area that I'd like to see us to improve upon.
Right, and it's the actual nature of the project is it does grow naturally. That is it by its very nature changes each day or each week as people add and build it further. And from the trail side, I think we heard the answer was essentially absolutely. Exactly. You guys are really looking to push it and take it further. So great question. Any parks or trails in particular that stood out to you, City Slickers, that you'd recommend visiting?
I'll let Kat. Kat has hiked all 400 plus miles. So
really?
Yeah. So she's seen every inch of this. So I'll let her handle that.
Well, that's a question we love the most. Our ambition is to hike every mile in every park as a culture, as a team. So what we look at again from a production point of view is how do we get diversity in terms of the geography, the types of parks, content that we're capturing. We're skewed a little bit on the west, right now, so we're looking at different parks and areas. We look very much at parks at risk as well, parks that are very frequented. So those are all things that start to inform what our recommendations are about where to go next in the parks environment.
Personal favorite?
My personal favorite, Yellowstone, for sure.
Yellowstone.
So far.
Yeah. Okay, another question is another one for the Trails project. In terms of risk management, what were your initial concerns? Software hurdles, hardware selection, deployment, legal issues?
Yep.
He says regarding image capture, but I think there's other legal issues as well. What if one of the hikers broke his leg?
Yep.
Did your initial risk assessment cover the issues, or did things come up in the process that you had to then kind of scramble to cover?
Those are all great questions. We, again, liken it as a sort of a state of going to war in a positive way, right? What is every variable that we can consider? Human, software, hardware, operational, on the ground sort of stuff. Let's solve for it intellectually, theoretically, and then let's see what happens. So one example of, we had a wonderful camera rig, an incredible cameraman. Brandon is fantastic. Looking at sort of who the talent can be, who's going to be able to carry 80 pounds of freight 15 hours a day and sleep on the rocks is a very big question. So all of those questions were key. So we tried to sort of logically solve as best we could. And then it was incredibly important to have a very strong morale and shared intent in the team, because when we did encounter problems, for example, many of us did not have freestyle climbing experience. We needed to move camera rigs off our backs and just, relay the team on some freestyle climbs. We were all terrified. I mean, we're like, oh my God, I can't move, right? Hanging onto the rocks and so on. So those were very difficult, and in every instance, there were things that we had to solve where they were. In terms of risk, our legal team was very concerned that we were taking a bunch of people out, that bears were going to attack us, that people were going to fall off the cliffs, and all of these things were legitimate risks. So we did three things. We purchased unbelievably expensive production insurance. That was the first thing that we did to manage risk for the client. Then we mandated, and this is something Vaishar has referred to earlier, that if you intend to be in this field team, you will be training for 3 months. That means you need to be prepared to go out there nutritionally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, on every level. If you show up day one out there and you are not ready, we're going to send you home. And it's up to you to really want this, to be able to be ready, and then to be able to endure all these different sorts of circumstances. So there were at least 3 months of very serious training for everybody who was in the field team, and we took that very seriously as well.
My partner and I started to really question what we had done at that point. When Kat told us that we had to actually physically go out and train, we knew that we were onto something interesting, just because I never in a million years would have thought being in advertising would have required me to actually go out and physically train. But it was it was incredibly important, and Kat was right, because hiking those miles was grueling.
So I hope then that base jumping view is not in your 2013
exactly,
plan.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll see. Who knows?
So I have a quick question for Josh, and then I have a final question from Brazil. I think is a great question to wrap up the entire week. I'd like to ask everyone. But quickly for Josh, we have a question saying, what's up and coming from Google in the Maps space? Is there any insights we can give into what we're going to see in 2013, or can we give any little hints or previews? Is there any, or even things that maybe are public but kind of quietly so that we can talk about?
Well, as you probably know, we have a habit of not really pre-announcing to keep the excitement up, but we do have a bunch of exciting things that I cannot tell you about. I wanted to speak a little bit to something that was said earlier, though. Is when we're deciding what cool, exciting things to put in our APIs and all our platforms, we definitely consider quite a lot of feedback from the developers. We have a public issue tracker where you can kind of list the things that you're interested in seeing requests, and we look at that really seriously every month. And the top ones we really try to answer. So you can star the requests, and if you have things that you want to see, and you can get some other developers on the same page as you, those are much more likely to occur when we know that useful to lots of people. That said, we'll keep on trying to make it as useful as possible, and more data and all of that.
So we can't give too many hints, but you can make requests, and that's off of the developer page, you said?
Yeah, if you go just to our documentation, you'll see an issue tracker, and in there's a list of some bugs you might see or feature requests you might see. And we look at those to kind of start feature requests, and that we take pretty seriously, and every quarter we answer some of those.
Great. Okay. So if you guys on the call have ideas, have thoughts, put them in there. And my last question, and let's start actually with Goodby. And this is a very broad question, and it's a good one to end with. We've only got a couple minutes, so it's going to have to be quick. This comes from Emmanuel in Brazil. What is your concept of creativity?
Yeah, that's
yeah, it's really easy,
question.
Right? If you were going to define creativity or describe your take on what that word means, what would it be?
I think creativity is just any time you can look at a problem a little bit differently than people have previously approached it, and just applying, the most simple solution to it without it feeling basic. Just because I think, in working on this project, I kind of naturally found myself, when the idea was feeling simple, that I needed to add things to it to make it feel more interesting, but it really just was kind of complicating things. So I think the key is just really having something that's very simple and easy to communicate, but is ultimately kind of like this universal truth that people can relate to on a lot of different levels.
And I think that has been the trend. You know, in the beginning when we started with interactive stuff, it was really simple, and then when everyone started to understand it and work with it, everyone, like Graham said, wanted to find like new technology and add cooler things. So I think like going back right now to make it even more simple, it was hard for us. And it was really good to have Rich Silverstein and Anders Gustafsson as our creative directors, because they have been working so much longer. So they were like almost cutting us off. They were like, no, this is the good idea. Don't add more layers to it.
Don't bury it under the icing. Very, very good answer, I think. And I think your point is very well taken. It's just very easy, especially when you start playing with technology, to go, oh, and we can make it 3D, and then we can make it turn inside out, and it'll glow. Keeping it simple and understandable and clear to people, I think, is a great piece of advice. And for you guys, what are your thoughts? If you were going to define your concept of creativity, what would it be?
For me, it's always pretty simple. It's always try and think of something that hasn't been thought of before, and if it has been thought of before and you're going to execute it in a way that hasn't been executed before.
For me, it's using the example in creative technology of being very free to imagine anything. For example, submarines and elevators once were considered to be preposterous notions, but they're completely normal, and all sorts of interesting technology and innovation is the result of someone saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this berserk thing. It's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. So that, for me, is what creative thinking is about.
Beautiful. All right. So thank you guys so much, both here in studio and on the call. It has been an absolute pleasure. Both of these projects are fantastic. If those of you listening would like to learn more about them, you can go to creativesandbox.com, where you'll find examples like these and many others. Thank you guys again so much for being our final hangout. I hope those of you who have watched from home or from the office have enjoyed the series, and we'd love to hear from you and hear if you'd like to see more of these. Otherwise, I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend, and for those in the U.S., a happy Thanksgiving next week, and we'll say adieu. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.